Welcome to Night Dreams Talk Radio, where we cover the latest news on UAP'S, aliens, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and the great mysteries of the unknown. Hosted by Gary Anderson, this show goes deep into the paranormal, asking all the questions we all want answers to. With expert guests and real stories, Gary uncovers the truth behind the unexplained. Be sure to listen and subscribe to join over 148,000 subscribers tuning in nightly for the most intriguing paranormal talk.
Join Night Dreams Talk Radio and support the show for just 99 cents a month. Unlock exclusive content and help us dive deeper into the paranormal mysteries you love.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers, talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's Talk Show Radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers Talk Show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news. Tune in on the radio, don't let Big Brother know. They're listening to everything, even Gary's late night show. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Show Dreamers Talk Show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
The strange news in brief. I'm Guy Ticker. On Mars, a statue was spotted by the Mars rover. An anomaly hunter scouring NASA images from Mars spotted a peculiar formation, which seems to resemble a statue. I'm Guy Ticker. The strange news is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com. You have just crossed into the realm of the unknown, where the unexplained meets reality. From UFOs to Bigfoot, from the acutely strange to the wildly wacky, and everything in between, this is your gateway to alternative talk radio. Welcome to Night Dreams Talk Radio with your host, the legend himself, Gary Anderson.
Well, we made it to Thursday the way today was going. I didn't even know if we were going to make it to the end of the night. Well, JC, what is the biggest, burrito you have ever seen?
Oh, I don't know, 4 foot maybe, something like that.
Well, do you know the longest one, would you believe, stretched over 2,000 feet? And it required near a ton of tortillas, beans, cheese, hamburger, and it took over 100 volunteers to, put it together.
How many thousands to eat it? Would they come out with a big gasoline truck to fill it with sauce? That's ridiculous.
I don't know, but yeah, I sure couldn't handle that big of a burrito.
Yeah, that's oh my, can you imagine they had put on a couple, that's just ridiculous. My goodness.
I don't know, but you remember back a couple years ago, they made a donut that was like 20 some feet around.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. Who bakes this? Well, how do they make it?
I don't know, but I tell you, I like to have the donut. That would have lasted me a week with my diet.
Yeah, they would have to bring in a little milk truck.
It was about 100 gallons of chocolate milk. Well, here's another thing. People love animals. Cats, dogs, squirrels, fish. But this lady in California actually had 200 cats in her house. And authorities found actually 160 of them still living and 46 were dead. And she tried to claim that she was rescuing these cats.
I think that's what I smell. You can smell that all the way over here. You imagine the smell? Oh.
Even from Yuma, California, all the way to Ohio.
Yeah, listen, that many cats, that's not even counting mix in the deadness of it. That's just cats in their cells. That many, that's stinky.
Well, it's just like people are hoarders. Maybe she was a hoarder of cats. But I can honestly tell you, years ago, we had the neighbors dropped off their cat. In other words, when they moved out, their cat just started hanging around our porch. And that cat was getting every female cat in the whole area pregnant. And then one day I went out there was like 3 cats on my porch. And then it was up like 12 cats. And then it was up to like 16, 17 cats over about a 4 or 5 month period. And I had to go to the Humane Society and get a cage and start catching them.
Yeah, that cat was doing some serious catting around, let me tell you. And they just kept multiplying. It was like seeing out of that Twilight Zone. Every time you go outside, there's more and more.
I know. Well, if anybody wonders why the text is wrong on YouTube, it'll be fixed at the end of the show. But, what happened is the computer, just as I clicked to go on the air, I had to go to a backup computer because the main computer started updating.
Oh, the timing is always impeccable with those, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Always at the wrong time. I don't know. So, you got anything, planned for this weekend?
Well, hopefully if it's not freezing out, it's going to maybe one
Wait a minute. You were just telling me a couple days ago in Dover, Ohio, it was 80-some degrees.
I still got my air conditioner and I had to use it. But last night it was down to 34. Then it gets up to almost 70 during the afternoon. It's ridiculous. Hopefully it's warm enough I can try to catch that 8-pounder and that bass. I haven't got him yet this year.
Yeah. Well, another thing, we got hit and are getting hit tonight with a flare as huge. And it's going to light up the earth like we've never had in our living days.
Wow, it could be potentially scary, I think.
Well, if you got a camera, it'd be a good time to get out here later tonight and take pictures of it.
Yeah, now, what about, did you ever see the Aurora Borealis out there too?
No, I'm talking about making waffles.
I know, but do you ever see it often enough is what I'm trying to say.
Not where I live.
No, that's what I want to know. Because sometimes I see it around here when it dips down, very rarely.
Well, you're going to see it everywhere. All across the United States here tonight.
Well, that's going to be, I'm going to check that out.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the internet works tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hope so.
Yeah. Well, I'm hungry for a burrito now.
Yeah, I know where there's a big one. You could probably get all you can eat from that thing, not even put a dent in it.
Well, let's find out about our guest tonight. You want to do that?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Captain G.S. Steckling is the curator-director of the 60-year-old plus George Adamski Foundation, Space Voyager, LLC, one of the oldest enduring worldwide UFO organizations in existence. A university graduate, veteran 30-year airline pilot, retired with more than 23,000 hours of flight time across the globe, also an amateur astronomer, author, and lecturer, he emphatically shares his extensive UFO experiences and history. Upgrading his father's 1981 book, We Discovered Alien Bases on the Moon, into Book 2 in 1997, and extensively adding to the Adamski book, Behind the Flying Saucer Mystery, Book 2, republished in 2015, He continues speaking worldwide while maintaining an extensive UFO archive and research program.
Well, welcome back, Glenn, and thank you for coming on short notice.
Well, it's my pleasure, Gary. It's always good to talk with you and interact with your listeners, and so to be able to help out here at the last minute is my pleasure.
Well, a question I want to ask you, not UFOs, not related to anything like that, right this second, but what do you think is going on with the airline manufacturers right now? I mean, I'm right in the heart of one of the biggest manufacturers, and it seems like they're having a strike, which is going on, which is actually hurting them big time, but yet, it seems like they are having problems with their planes weekly.
Well, we can say this, that the development of aircraft is a complex industry, and to do so at an accelerated rate, it becomes a factory line of manufacturing, and so quality control has to be always monitored very closely. And also, over the many decades, we have farmed out the construction and composition of certain parts. For instance, the tail can be made in one country, the carbon fiber for the wings in a different country, and so on and so forth. So everything is in different locations, and then that's all shipped to a central area to be put together. And when you outsource like this, then it becomes harder and harder to maintain oversight to make sure that the regulations and procedures are followed stringently, and corners are not cut, and profits are not siphoned off, and what have you. So I think to some degree there's a certain amount of complacency that has been wormed its way into the industry that has not been fully addressed by the federal agencies that are overseeing this. Oftentimes, they are somewhat in the pocket of these conglomerate manufacturers, and then you're only down to two. I mean, you only have Boeing and Airbus, and of course, you have a small contingent in Russia, which really doesn't export any airplanes, or the Chinese, or whatever. So those are the two major manufacturers. And under these circumstances, there's going to be some issues, and it's not unusual over the history of aviation that a certain amount of chance was taken, very much like in Las Vegas, where you roll the dice.
Yeah.
And so. And of course, people have to understand that these airplanes are flying 17, 18, 20 hours a day sometimes in constant usage. They have to be at the price that they are cost. So there is, think about your car. It'll be out running on the freeway in just a two-dimensional environment, let alone one in the air where they are much, larger forces and gravity forces and aerodynamics and everything that's involved with that. So it is really quite astounding how well these airplanes perform. And so, of course, like anything mechanical, eventually there are problems that will arise.
Well, again, it's farming everything out. Years ago, they used to make, and I'm not going to mention the manufacturer, they used to make 90% of the plane.
Yes.
I mean, and then, they said, well, we'll farm out the basically the body of the craft to be made here and there, and then all they do is assemble it.
Correct.
And that's scary.
Well, yeah. yeah, I would say so too. And then, and of course, you have to have properly trained maintenance people, and that are not constantly working under the pressure of being under the gun to make certain time criterias, or the fact that people don't understand that certain parts have different repair motifs. So, for instance, there are some things that if they break, you look in what we call the minimum equipment list, and there it lists in there that it doesn't have to be addressed for, let's say, 48 hours or what have you. And so just because something is not functioning up to 100% of its standard, that doesn't mean that it is repaired on the spot. And so therefore, they are given a lag time in order to get to a next maintenance base or where the parts are and what have you. And so there is an ability to go with items that aren't necessarily 100% functioning. Of course, the ultimate decision has to do with the captain. And there were times where I refused to accept these type of circumstances until it was alleviated or fixed to my satisfaction. And so, that then you have to stand up for the command that you have earned and inherited and not worry about what management has to say.
Years ago, a friend of mine, we're going back into like early 80s. We had to fly to Minneapolis. Now, my friend was working for me at that point with the business I had. And he was retired from the FAA. He was actually one of the area regional, whatever, directors. Right. So we were flying on this particular craft. I'm not going to mention it. And we were sitting right by the bulkhead where the restroom was. And when the plane took off, he said, okay, that when we land, because we had to land at a couple different hops to get to Minneapolis, he said, we're getting off this plane. And I go, why? He goes, well, that shouldn't have moved. Because it made a noise and that you could actually see the bulkhead just move back and forth. Mm-hmm. Well, after we did our thing, about a month later, he gets a hold of me and he says, do you know that plane we were on? That's the plane that was going to Hawaii where the top ripped off. Mm. That scared me after that, so.
Well, there's some things to think about. First of all, the Aloha Airline 737-100, where the top came off, was an inter-island flight. Those airplanes are not capable of flying mainland to Hawaii. They're only capable of flying short distances.
Well, that's what he told me, so.
Right, and so that airplane came out of Kona, and was climbing out and going to Honolulu when that disaster occurred, and they dumped it down into Maui, which that in itself is quite a feat because Maui's a short runway, and so it required some skill and what have you. So, but there are circumstances that we could go through a list alone and do a show about airplanes, models, and circumstances over the many years where questionable things could have been avoided. But the idea is that most people don't realize there's upwards of 45,000 airplanes in the air daily all over the world, and the amount of accidents and incidents that happen are still extremely rare. So
you're safer in a plane than you are taking a cab or driving into downtown LA.
Sure. It's just, when something happens in an airplane, you have sequestered an amount of people, and it's a much more, for lack of a better word, spectacular event than car crashes. I mean, we lose, 60,000 people a year on our freeways, and we don't think twice about that. And so, but all in all, I flew for, 35, 40 years, and I'm still around today. So I can say that it is quite a dynamic and safe industry.
I think so. Now, getting into the subject about disclosure, UAP'S, how do you feel? Again, another whistleblower came forward here just the other day. It says the Pentagon knows, but is not allowing and giving the information to Congress.
That's without a doubt. But then we have to understand here that you cannot just take a momentary snapshot. You have to look at this subject in its totality and understand that in the beginning of when we started to really collect UFO data, each one of the military services had its own specific agencies and collection service. And eventually it fell to the Air Force and to put this all together. And then I believe in 1953, the CIA took over all of that. And since that time, while the military agencies just simply denied and deferred, the CIA began a very intensive lobbying effort to misinform and disinform and sequester UFO information, whether it's sightings, films, negatives, witnesses, contacts, what have you. And so this particular method of squashing this subject through direct and sometimes indirect threats and things like the Men in Black. They would send out their own trained intelligence personnel to destroy and confuse the subject. Valiant Thor was one of those who worked for the Pentagon. He was never, ever an extraterrestrial. That is pure misinformation. And there are dozens like him that went into organizations like NICAP and the many different organizations. In fact, they came to our front door in the 60s as well and tried to infiltrate in order to confuse the subject. So this has been going on for, half a century or better, and it's not any different now. We know for a fact that the military collects this information, and it's not just the Pentagon. It is the intelligence community, the CIA, the NSA, and they're the ones who control it, and they're the ones who determine policy. If the president today would walk into the facility and say, I want to see these files, they will say to him, sorry, you don't have the security clearance to see this. And they've told presidents all the way back until Johnson's time. Kennedy was really the last president to be able to ferret some of this information out. And that didn't serve him very well either. And so what happens is that no one is going to release what they fully know. There is no whistleblower that comes internally, because everything they say and everything that they publish or write has to be pre-cleared with military command beforehand. And they're not stupid. They're not going to release stuff that they want you to know. What they do is release stuff that they want you to be confused about. And when I listen to these disclosure people, and when I listen to some of these whistleblowers, I can confirm that there is a large percentage of what they have to say, which is absolute bull. But since they are using the bait and switch, a very classic psychology 101 technique, in which everybody says, oh, well, look, so-and-so has come from this and this place, or used to be so-and-so officer, and so on and so forth. They throw at you this stew of credentials, supposedly in order to convince you that what they have to say is absolute gospel. And that's not the case at all. Every one of these people have to sign secrecy acts and secrecy information, and that is durable for the entire life of the person. You can't just suddenly decide tomorrow that I'm not going to follow this paperwork anyway and do what I want to say. That doesn't work. That's pure zero. So consequently, you have to listen to what is being divulged and understand the misinformation that is being injected into that in order to take a tangent. This idea that we have sequestered aliens in Area 51 that are working for us is nonsense. There is not a facility on this planet capable of holding these extraterrestrial visitors against their will. We do not have the technology they have. They are thousands of years ahead of us. And the idea that we can put them in a little jail cell or something, or hold them in a particular location like Area 51 or 52 or whatever the imagination wants to come up with thereafter, is absolute. It's laughable is what it is.
Well, it is. You really think about it, the technology they would have to possess. And let's face it, if we were holding them and basically as hostage or for experimenting, don't you think their comrades would come and rescue them and then maybe take some recourse against us?
Well, I would say that they wouldn't take recourse. They wouldn't need to, but they would never leave their people behind. Never. And they wouldn't have to, because once again, we have nothing that can hold these particular visitors when they come and walk amongst us, because they look like you and I. And consequently, the other ones, their own brethren, would never leave them behind. And so when you understand this, then you can start to systematically pull apart all the, well, for lack of a better word, garbage that circulates out in this particular field that is constantly used in order to sensationalize this subject. And the reason that is done is that it keeps this debate constantly going around and around and around in circles, so that there's never the next logical step taken. The admittance that we have visitors and that there is extraterrestrial intelligence beyond this planet. So the next question would be, from that, how is it that they advanced? Who are they? What do they believe? What have they experienced? And these type of concepts change our society. And internally, the powers that be do not want any change. So we are fighting against it 100% ourselves.
But why do you think the government is trying to not allow the general population to know really what is going on? What do you think their motive is?
It's the motive is very simple. It changes the status quo of how we operate this events on this planet. First of all, the idea that we do not have a one world organization or government has already become true long, long ago. And the events on this world we've already released, we have already exposed that some of the World War I was manipulated, World War II was manipulated, the industrialists behind it and the bankers were irrespective of religion, race, country. This was a total meltdown of profiteering. And so consequently, the reason that we don't want any of this to become out is because the simplest concept or the simplest revelation of the abilities of our space visitors would change our world. Let's just take one example. The reality of free energy changes everything on this planet. No longer oil, no longer fuel, no longer manipulation of prices, no longer global markets. I mean, just one tiny aspect of their advancement changes our entire planet, and it is our own internal power infrastructure that does not want any change, and they will never acquiesce to that change. So the idea that you're going to get disclosure is a fantasy. All you get is more misinformation thrown into the pot to keep you more confused and running around like hamsters on a wheel.
Oh, you're so right. Hey, Glenn, we have to take about a 2-minute break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about disclosure and, ETs, if they really exist, are they really a threat to humanity? So we'll be right back with Glenn right after this. You're listening to, Night Dreams Talk Radio. We'll be right back.
Control, and we took it for granted.
Night Dreams Talk Radio with the legendary Gary Anderson. From UFOs to Bigfoot and everything in between, we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the unexplained. Join us for one of the fastest growing shows in the world of the unknown.
And we are back with Glenn. Again, some of these people on the disclosure movement are now talking about something is going to happen with ETs in the next 10 years. Something that could maybe be bad is now the new rumor coming out from everywhere. Have you heard that one?
I've been speaking about that for decades. When they can't get what they want in one avenue, then you go to the next one, which has to be the threat environment in order to try to get you fearful so that you will pay attention to them and gobble up every piece of little fragment that they throw out there in order to stimulate your fear and insecurity receptacles. And that also is nonsense. As I said in my new book that was released just last year, it's called The UFO Reality, Can Truth Prevail? And it's available on Amazon and eBay and many different other places. I discuss the fact that for thousands of years there are records of these extraterrestrials visiting us in every single culture that has stretched across our planet and through all the timelines. And so consequently, if they wanted to take us over, they could have done so long ago. I mean, it wasn't the turn of the century where we were still shooting bow and arrows at each other and shooting muskets and things like that. Their ability to travel space and their knowledge surpassed us by thousands of years. If they were hostile, they could have taken us at any time. And they don't, even though we have been aggressive towards them when they have landed and tried to attack them and the military shoot at them. They have never retaliated.
Yeah, but Glenn,
yeah.
It could be one day a new visitor is coming to this planet for the first time, and we shoot at it, and it might shoot back.
Well, I think that we fail to realize that when you have advanced to the ability of traveling deep space, this is many thousands of years ahead of us. And so that is not just thousands of years technologically, but thousands of years in advancement sociologically and intellectually as well. Excuse me. So consequently, just as we have progressed out of the barbaric ages where we, did all kinds of strange things, lived in caves, clubbed each other over the head.
Yeah, but we might in the near future, you know that.
Yeah, well, there's always a might and a maybe, but I would like to think that we progress to the point where we can look at our options without being so stupid in order to recreate the disasters of the past. And so I think that I know for a fact, having met these people, that they have learned to walk away from this destructive nature that we continue to foster. And I think we could do the same thing if we would just simply use our common sense and rational thinking and not allow ourselves to be manipulated by politics and religion and party and every other single thing that is used out there in order to galvanize the people into thoughtless action.
I don't know. How about people like Travis Walton? Do you think he was abducted? And other people that claim they've been taken aboard craft and experimented on and then shown how the craft works?
Well, I know that we have our own intelligence community has used hypnotic suggestion as well as the use of drugs and experimental machines such as hypersonic wave and microwave machines and things like that into manipulating people's thinking and public's perception, and also some of which I talk about in my new book. And so I have yet to interact with any anybody that I have done officially or that my family has done officially, whether it happened to be with NASA officials or Pentagon officials or scientific people or whatever, that give credence to these type of activities. I think that there's a lot of vivid imagination being used. I think that there's a lot of suggestion that is being projected our own. Once again, there is no need to abduct anybody in order to gain any type of scientific data. All of that can be done by remote means and remote instrumentation from space. Sitting up in the ship orbiting the Earth, they can monitor your thoughts, your molecular structure, all the way down to your atoms. They don't need to come down here and chase you around like a chicken and then pick you up and then try to gain any information from you. What type of reasonable data are you going to get from a terrified subject?
Not much.
That's nonsense. And so consequently, it's important to realize that there is a definitive divergence in this field, in which in 1961, the test case was run. And after that, it started to accelerate in the late 60s and on up about how we can take people involuntarily and do things to them, and then we can blame UFOs and we can blame extraterrestrials, so that the people become so frightened into the fear factor that they want no interaction of one of these crafts land. We don't want to walk up there anymore and introduce ourselves and see what it's all about. The first thing we're ready to do is to fight, attack, and kill. And so that is exactly the type of attitude that our own official agencies want us to have, because once again, if there is a peaceful interaction and exchange, then change can come about in our society, and they don't want that. They will do anything they can to block it.
How about all the TikTok and all that? Do you think
that's all our stuff? When you look at Acorn, TikTok, Triangular, Cubu, the list goes on and on. Anything that has appendages or aerodynamic extensions to it, this is all our stuff. There are only two types of craft that are capable of traveling at the fantastic speeds of interstellar space. They are lenticular, bell-shaped, and then cigar-shaped. This allows for the energy that is used for its propulsion, and it's free energy that is projected into space from the planets and the suns and everything else. This is electromagnetic energy that in itself travels twice the speed of light. And so to travel at these speeds and beyond, you need to have a ship that is configured for the propulsion, not for imagination. And so they build the couple of types of ships that will allow that propulsion to fluctuate over the craft like living energy. And it exudes from the ship through the pores of the skin around the craft. And all these other shapes are nothing more than our own research and development, back engineering, that we are putting out into the atmosphere, many different countries and many different experimental locations.
Very interesting. Now on the moon, the late John Lear claimed that there is ET bases on the moon. How do you feel about that?
I should know. I knew John very well. We used to fly L-1011 TriStars together.
Yeah.
And so, and I also know John well enough to know, he had my father's book that was already out in 1981, so it wasn't like he was a pioneer in the lunar anomaly investigation by any means. He was a Johnny-come-lately to this. And I remember that when in the 90s, when there was this ridiculous claim that we never went to the moon and everything was fake, blah, 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 blah. And so I was at a UFO conference in Laughlin, Nevada, and John was there too. And I said, okay, John, you and I know better, and I don't understand why you're continuing to mimic this false narrative. And so I took the pictures, the 8x12 Hasselbalch that I have in the vault that we acquired from NASA when we did the original book, my father and I. And I brought them along, and we sat down in the restaurant, his daughter and him, myself, and I think there was another person there as well. And we went through the pictures, and I said, look at this, John, and tell me that this is fake. And he said, there's no way in hell. This is real. And I said, well, why in the world do you continue to push a false narrative? And I know the answer to that already to begin with, because John was very sensitive to the fact that at a certain point in time, he was no longer the focus of attention, and that he no longer garnered, a certain amount of media and what have you. And so he jumped on any bandwagon that would get him back in the forefront. But yes, I mean, it's no secret that we have bases on the moon. Not only does our own military have bases on the moon. If you look at Colonel Curacau's book, The Day After Roswell, he talks about Operation Rainbow that went from 1957 to 1967 to establish a military base on the moon, which was fully functional in 1967. That was before Apollo 12 and 11 astronauts got to the moon. And so consequently, when our astronauts, who were all highly commissioned military officers, got to the moon and found out that they were part of the PR program and that we were already there, some of them were rather upset about it.
Well, I remember one of them, very famous one. It's, they told him to get off the channel and go to the medical channel when he started talking about, look at these craft.
That was Neil Armstrong, yes.
Yeah, bigger and huge. That tells you, the technology that we see is not what we really have. We're so far advanced that I think a lot of people would be shocked to know that some of these craft are definitely ours.
Well, I think people don't understand that the technology we show them there's a lag factor of about 15 to 20 years that what we really have is 20 years ahead of time of what we're showing the general public. And so, while we shot the Saturn V and the rockets into the atmosphere, into space, into the moon, we already had the introduction of electrostatic propulsion that we had acquired from not only Roswell, but there were many other Socorro and many different places where there were some faulty systems and some of these crafts crash landed or what have you. And so we developed a lot of our technology, such like night vision, infrared, and things like that, all from back engineered technology. And so not only do we have some bases on the moon, but of course there are some extraterrestrial visitors that have their bases on the moon as well. In the beginning, there was a very large one in Gassendi Crater, and I have the 1930s photograph from Mount Wilson Observatory that shows all the tubular construction in the base of the crater. A lot of that has moved to the backside of the moon simply because we have become more prolific in our experimentation and aggression, and we fire lasers and pulse beam cannons and things like that to the front side of the moon. And so in order to escape that harassment, a lot of them have moved to the backside, which actually is a more eco-friendly environment there. Has a more, shall we say, uniform gravity, and has the ability to sustain some of the water. We talk about the Goldilocks areas on the moon now that we have admitted to. We're in the bottom of the crater. It is a constant 63 degrees Fahrenheit, which our scientists described as a nice, pleasant day in San Francisco. Yeah. So the moon has constant temperature, livable. It has atmospheric gravity. It has water, and so on and so forth. So all the foundation and fundamentals of life exist there to be collected and to make a sustainable long-term facilities there.
Well, again, too, our government, NASA keeps saying we're going to create a base on the moon. To the general public, this has been going on for years, and they keep pushing it back, and it never happens.
And that's true, and that's because they know the general public well enough to know that all you have to do is to give them a nibble of the cheese, but never have to give them the cheese for dinner. And so we keep promising all kinds of things and never delivering it to them, because we know that from one generation to the next, we forget, or there is a level of disinterest or re-interest in other areas, and there's not the same push to sustain this. I mean, when we saw the movie 2001 come out, Kubrick's movie, we looked at the space station that they envisioned and its rotation. I mean, when we look at the International Space Station, it is an absolute Model T Ford in comparison to what we can produce. This idea that we have to be in a non-shielded environment that is sustainable to solar radiation and to penetration of meteoric devices or space junk, 6,000 pieces of it orbiting the planet, and at 17,000 miles an hour, and that the astronauts have to survive in a zero gravity condition. We can all alleviate that very, very, very easily. And it would be a lot better if we did it cooperatively. So in other words, we should have the Russians, the Americans, the Chinese, the Indians, everybody who wants to get on board, put their money together and work together to produce the environment upon which we can go into space safely and comfortably. But then once again, when that happens, and that's what John Kennedy envisioned, a global space industry that would eventually nullify the military-industrial complex, that idea changes the entire superstructure of the world and how we wish to manipulate it and to hypnotize the people into this constant nationalism.
It's scary. Again, I've been doing this so long, Glenn, just like you. And so many people saying, oh, major disclosure is going to happen next month. And a year goes by, another year goes by, 10 years go by, 20 years go by, 40 years go by. We're not hearing anything new.
Well, like I said in one of our earlier programs, I remember I got up to do a lecture in '92 in Los Angeles, and the same thing I heard, within 6 months there's going to be full disclosure. And I said, yeah, good luck with that one. And then we hear a couple of the personalities whom people can go and look for themselves. We don't have to name them. They're out there constantly trying to beat that drum as well. And as I said on George Norrie's program Beyond Belief, which I did for Gaia TV, I said, and I directly addressed that because he has a friend and a good guest that is tooting that trumpet. I said, that's not going to happen. Here's the reasons why. And those reasons haven't changed from 5 years ago, from 20 years ago, or 50 years ago. And it's not going to change. And that's once again, it's simply the bait that so that you will listen to the rest of what they will say unquestionably. And we can't do that. There isn't anybody that shouldn't be questioned. You should question me. I hopefully will provide you with the references and the resources that you can discover it and confirm it for yourselves. I don't just simply say, hey, look at me, I'm so-and-so, la-di-da, you have to take what I say verbatim. That's nonsense. I would never do that. And I'm out there constantly questioning these people and say, hey, wait a minute, what about that? How come you're not required to make the case that you present and provide it with foundation, information, and fact? Like I listened to one of these guys say, I was offered $2 billion to keep my mouth quiet. And you don't think that this person was going to not take $2 billion if that was a real offer? Come on. Who are we kidding? And they'd have taken $2.25 if it was a real offer.
Well, $2 billion, and there's so many. That is a fast exaggeration. But again, do you think that if we if the government ever came clean, I don't see how they can now.
They can't. No, they cannot. And that's part of the problem. The UFO community has purposely and voluntarily caused the greatest waves of confusion because they jump without thought or consequence, without responsibility, into the middle of the mix in order to get their share of the so-called attention and notoriety. And so what happens is even if the government, which they couldn't do anyway, but even if they did decide to give you the real information, it would be so contrary to the garbage that is floating around out there today that the first people who would attack it would be the UFO community. And they would say, oh, no, you can't believe that because they lied to you before, so obviously they're lying to you again. You'll just believe us. Well, I can only say to the people and your listeners that we have created our own mess, and it's not always fair to tout the conspiracy and all these other accusations when so much of this information has been purposely disrupted from within.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to go away. That's the interesting part. And people want to know, people are everywhere, from actors to doctors to lawyers to lay people. Everybody wants to know the truth. And we're not going to get the truth. That's just not going to happen. And, some people even claim that the same person I think you talked about, and I'm not mentioning his name, about the 2 billion, ever so often talks about a false flag. Do you think there's going to be a false flag one day?
Well, I can only tell you that the claims and accusations fly around like wind in a hurricane.
I thought you were going to say like in a horse stall with a bunch of horse shit and flies.
Well, I'm trying to be somewhat diplomatic.
I wasn't.
But the idea here is, once again, when do we demand accountability from the people who make these type of statements? And the moment you demand accountability of them, then they right away run into another narrative. I grew up in a middle-class family kind of narrative. And so consequently, this step around, this do-si-do dance, is not getting anywhere other than to keep a certain percentage of the listening public enthralled with the next tidbit of information. And so consequently, it's not to say that truth isn't available out there. There are bits and pieces of truth that do come out and are pushed in order to try to give people an insight. But you have to dig for them, and you have to know what you're looking for. And there's nobody that offers you everything on a nice silver platter so that it's palatable to whatever our pros and cons and wishful thinking is. And we have to learn that there is a definitive difference between science fiction, fantasy, and reality and the truth. And we at this point have intermixed those so much that we cannot tell anymore what is reality and what is science fiction. And so that is a big stumbling block and a major roadblock into our advancement.
It is. Now, how can they find your books, and do you have a website you want to share?
Sure. Adamski Foundation, which is oneword.com, or you can just type my name into Google, and unfortunately, you will find a plethora of information. You will find my books on Amazon, and unfortunately, my new book that just is out on Amazon, the price is a bit high because for the first year, Amazon takes about 30% and tax it onto the price. But you can find my book on Blurb, BLURB.com. It's also available on eBay, several of our books. You can find more information about us on adamskifoundation.com. And my new book, which was 335 pages, goes through my family history in this particular subject, starting in the early 60s. All of it documented, our invitation to NASA and 22 scientists, Colonel Freeman and his staff at the Pentagon, the British House of Lords, and so on and so forth. I provide foundation and factual reference for everything. And then the later half of the book is called Reality Check. And it divulges in each one of these particular subjects: UFO history, misinformation, abductions, and all sorts of other things. And I think people, if if you're really interested and you take a look at it, it may provide you for some rational answers to what is happening in this field. And I definitely come from a unique perspective and a unique history in this field. I'm not in the business to make a name for myself. I could care less. And the information I give as freely as I can possibly. And so hopefully that you will find answers to some of the questions that you seek if you look for this material.
Well, Glenn, again, I want to thank you for coming on, on very short notice. I appreciate it. And you have a great weekend that's coming up, will you?
Thank you, Gary, and a shout out to all the people who are recovering in Florida, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Our best wishes and prayers are for you as well.
Okay, my friend, you take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, what's our topic tomorrow, JC?
Well, our topic tomorrow is, first our guest is going to be Lou Elizondo, and our topic tomorrow is about, what he's done in UFO field and his book, Imminent. So that's going to be exciting.
I think so. And we're going to really dive deep in that. We're trying to find right now a second guest, or we do have a second guest tomorrow, don't we?
Yeah, Mr. Tim Schwartz is going to come on, and he's going to be talking about, maybe some alien hybrids living among us, or are they on the moon also?
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting, too. Again, I want to apologize. We had to cancel our guests we had on tonight because I just didn't think it would fit in good with the show because some things changed. So also, if the people, you're looking at the title of the show and the information about our guests, that is going to be corrected right after the show because everything just really was a nightmare tonight. You know that, putting everything together to get on the air.
Yeah, the timing of your computers is...
one of my main computers I used to stream out with through YouTube decided I wasn't even paying attention. All of a sudden, I'm looking at starting to update. So, So people calling in, we're going off the air. So, I hate to say it, call in tomorrow. And I just wanted to tell everybody, please leave a comment. After the show ends, you can actually leave a comment about the show. Please do. Tell us what guests you like to hear on the show. Tell us how we're doing and all that. Well, to tomorrow, till we have Lou on and then Tim Schwartz. Everybody have a good one. We'll catch you on the other side. Everybody take care.